podcast.
I got a cat going squirrely on an office chair in my little studio. And I guess that means welcome to the Tuesday Zoo, kids, even though I know this is Wednesday. Release day is Wednesday, but I'm recording this on Tuesday, and my cat is going crazy. What happens is I record this program on my drum throne because it's quiet. My office chair makes a bunch of squeakies, and so anytime I bring up the drum throne to sit on, my cat loves it and she'll jump on it. So I move my office chair out of the way over where she can get to it because she just likes to jump up on whatever's novel. And so the chair becomes hers. She jumps up on it and then she goes crazy. And so I'm trying to record this with the time that I have. I got a cat going bonkers with the office chair, making a bunch of noise, being a goofball. And that's kind of useful, you know. I was going to start this one off. I was prepared, and I will do it now. To begin with some lyrics, okay? You ready for this? I asked for the truth every time, and now the ugly details are stuck in my mind, and there's a premonition I keep putting off. And the more time passes, the more I get soft. I'm standing up there in a weakened state, and it's not great. Sarah Harmer, weakened state. And I really love that song. And I offer those lyrics now, even though they have very, very little to do with this episode, except for the weakened state part. And there's a great lyric in that song later. One of my favorite Sarah Harmer lyrics, one of my favorite lyrics, period. This song is written about a relationship that's breaking up, and yeah, I know. Relevant, but not really the focus of where I'm at today. That song is written about a breakup, and there's a suggestion of some impropriety on Sarah Harmer's partner's part. There's an implication in there, and the song ends with, "And I'm not saying anything. You think that I forgot, 'cause I'm not saying anything, but I'm thinking a lot." Dude, beware, lads, all you lads out there listening. Beware that silence. I'm not saying anything. You think that I forgot, 'cause I'm not saying anything, but I'm thinking a lot. Beware that silence, man. Sarah Harmer. Still waiting for that call, Sarah. Still waiting for that call. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. If Danny ever finds herself booked elsewhere, unable to make the tour, I am your guy and I'm ready. It's the weakened state part, okay? The song is called Weakened State. And for me, it's relevant just for that. I've been thinking about my energy these days. I've been thinking about particularly the past week or so. And that's what springs to mind. A weakened state. I'm in a weakened state, kids. I think it's all just beginning a little bit to catch up with me. And there's a lot to catch up with me over the past 6 months, right? If you've been listening, relationship, a long-term relationship breaking up. And we're like 2 continents now. Not incontinence, 2 continents. Just inch by inch, day by day, drifting a little bit further apart. I am in my home, solo at the moment. My spouse or significant other, my ex now, which I still stumble over saying, has been house sitting. And so this is the first real taste for both of us, you know, of being separate. Even though we remained friendly and on good terms, she was here for dinner the other night because she had to do some stuff at the house. It's fine. Skip the dishes. And it's still amicable and it is still conscious and we are still being as delicate and generous with each other as we can be. We're doing very, very well at that. But the drift is happening. And every day, minute by minute, inch by inch, we drift. And that's okay. That is the natural way of these things. You know, once you make that determination, once you've decided together, if you have the luxury of deciding together that this is your course of action, the drift begins, and that can be as tumultuous or as gentle as you choose to make it. We continue to make it gentle, conscious, and that's okay, and that's all well and good. But there is still a backlog of emotion tied to that, and I've done really, really well. I'm proud of myself, I will say it. I've done really, really well at handling, processing, working with those emotions, mostly in a productive way. All right, there's going to be days, there's just going to be times when it catches up to you and it's heavy and you have to deal with those moments. But generally speaking, over the course of what's, turning into like 6 months now, I've done pretty well with the emotional stuff. All right, I have kept it level. I remember often Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society. Have I talked about this before? It's one of my favorite things. There's this, he's inspired, if you've not seen this movie, it's one of my favorites. It inspired me to go into teaching until I realized we don't live in a 1950s all-boys school anymore. School ain't the same as it was, man. Here's Robin Williams, this charismatic, inspiring figure, bit of a subversive, bit of a rebel, and he's teaching these young boys who have been brought up in such a rigid upper-class structure and expectation. He's teaching them to think for themselves. He's teaching them to be individuals, right? He's teaching them to go their own way. And the establishment does not like that one bit, but the kids are all over it. We've been oppressed and suppressed and repressed our whole friggin' lives. Here's this guy coming along saying, hey, rock the boat just a little bit. Sneak out and read poetry. Kiss girls. You know what I mean? Do the carpe diem stuff. Because we're all worm food, boys. And so they start doing that, but then they start doing it stupid. So one of them disrupts a school assembly with a prank, and that's not cool, and people get very angry. And so Robin Williams, John Keating, the character, has to come to the residence, pull the lads together and say, hey, fellas, getting kicked out of school isn't revolutionary, all right? It's not subversive. It's stupid. Don't do that. And in my mind, I remember him saying, keep your wits about you. In reality, I don't think he says that. It's something like, keep your heads about you, something like that. But I have locked on to keep your wits about you. And I use this with people over and over and over, and I use it with myself. And over the past 6 months, when stuff has gotten heavy, right? When stuff has felt out of my control, when stuff has been painful, when the future has been very, very uncertain and so remains, when stuff hasn't gone my way, I've come back to that little mantra. Keep your wits about you. Don't let it push you over the edge, right? Don't react emotionally. Don't get so wrapped up in your emotions that you do say something stupid. Don't let it pull you down the rabbit hole. Don't let it pull you into depression. Don't let it make you irrational. Keep your wits about you. Feel things. Absolutely feel things, and do not deny what you feel. Suppressing emotions creates dis-ease. Don't do that, but keep your wits about you. And I've had to remind myself over and over and over, keep your wits about you. And I've done well. I've done well with the emotional heaviness of the past 6 months and the fear that comes with the uncertainty. Right? My ground has been very uneven. My ground has been very unsteady. And that's not easy to deal with, especially if you are a person who is inclined towards anxiety, which is about control. This has been a great testing ground for releasing control, as I have talked about. And I've done a really good job of surrendering into this, of allowing this, of keeping my wits about me, of not falling apart, keeping it level. And I've done well, but there is still an emotional backlog that comes with that, right? And you can manage and manage and manage that as well as you want, but once in a while, it's just going to catch up to you. And then my dad dies a couple of weeks ago, and then that's just an emotionally charged situation. What happens is you find yourself in these emotionally charged situations, and it wears you out, okay? Handling those emotions, feeling them, processing them, doing that in a group is helpful, but it also amplifies those emotions. Everybody else is kind of joined together. You're at a funeral, you're doing all this stuff. There was a lot of work to do on the apartment. It's physically tiring, it's mentally tiring, it's emotionally tiring. And you tack that on to the end of what's been 5-6 months of this other enormous change that has been mentally, emotionally, physically taxing. And you get into a weakened state, a mentally, emotionally weakened state. And so I've got these two really supercharged things: this marriage ending, my dad dying, and all of the associated emotion just kind of swirling around, coming through me, being around me. And then this winter! I'm not a winter guy. I think it's some sort of cosmic, karmic joke that I was born in and continue to live in the snow belt, because I am so not a winter guy. And the driving last weekend around my father was some of the roughest winter driving I've done in a long time. Now, I am no rookie. Okay, I've been driving in the snow belt for 35 years. All right, I know my way around a snowy road. But this was particularly egregious. I mean, this was bad. Like, I'm already in a weakened state, tired, and the drive home, my hometown is, under the best circumstances, a 2.5-hour drive or so from where I live north. These were not the best circumstances. We're talking like 3.5 hours tiptoeing along these really delicate roads. And driving home, just the roads were really icy, and there had been wind warnings, right? There was a wind warning in effect in winter in Canada. You know, you're getting into some heavy stuff, right? And so it's just whipping across the highway. The roads are icy. The wind is whipping. There are drifts because where there are no brakes, no tree brakes or whatever, no wind brakes, the snow's just blown and drifted onto the highway. So you're driving along, it's already slippery, and then you're hitting these drifts on the highway. Very, very dicey. And you know as well as I do, you experienced snowbelt drivers, you can't hit your brakes through there, and you cannot turn your wheel because you're going to go in the ditch if you do. And so it's like these periods of just holding it on the road, and then the wind is blowing you. There was a certain point where I was angled just such on the highway where the wind was blowing across me. It's okay if the wind is blowing into you. Like if you're driving into the wind, that's okay. Car's aerodynamic, much easier to hold it together. But at a certain point, the wind was whipping straight sideways. Wind warning wind, all right? Not your delicate winter breeze. Real deal winter wind. If it had been snowing, we would have been in heavy-duty whiteout situations. That kind of a wind. And it's picking up all this snow. The wind is pushing me across the highway as I'm coming into drifts. Now, the wind is pushing me, so I'm trying to compensate with the wheel. Otherwise, it's going to blow me off the road. But you can't turn your wheel and brake into snow drifts or you're going to spin out. Very, very delicate, very, very dicey, just icy, windy, snowy roads. Took a lot out of me, man, and this winter has been a rough one, even by our standards, especially over the past few years. Like, I think last year I shoveled maybe 4 times. Fabulous. My kind of winter, man. This year, snow came in December, came early, stayed. Like, there was a week period where we shoveled every morning to get my spouse's car out of the driveway. I'm lucky enough to work from home. I don't have that problem most of the time. Had to shovel her out every morning for like a week, and then the snow stayed. I mean, it happens. Sometimes you get a big dump of snow in October. Goes away. And lately, December snow goes away. Didn't happen this time, right? It came, it stayed, and it's continued to snow. Like, I've shoveled a lot this year, and it is cold. It's been so cold at times. And I know some of you people on the prairies, Northern Ontario, you know, you're playing your tiny violins, but I don't care. All right. Cold is cold. It's been that. It has been so gray and dark and cold and snowy. I'm looking out my window right now in my little studio, and it's just gray. Everything is just friggin' gray. Sometimes, a lot of the time, the compensation for it being minus 20 or minus 25 or minus 30 with the wind chill is that it's clear and the sun is out. And so it's like, okay, well, at least I'm getting this kind of sunny feeling while it's frigid outside. Hasn't been that. You know, it's been cold, but not cold enough for that. And just gray. Gray, gray, gray. Snow, snow, snow. I said to people January was a long year, you know. And there was a point a few days ago, I'm trying to get out walking, right? I'm trying to be active. I'm playing a lot of pickleball, and I'm really grateful that my shoulder healed up. Playing a lot of pickleball, but walking has become part of my thing, right? When things began to fall apart with my spouse or significant other, I took to walking, and I walked hours and hours and hours around the neighborhood, just processing, just moving, just getting energy moving. So those were delicate, dangerous emotional situations. And if you just sit, and if you don't move that energy, it's going to create a problem for you, right? It's going to create a depression. It's going to create an illness. It's going to create anxiety. You need to process that emotion. You need to process that energy. So I took to walking, and I just walk and walk and walk and walk and think and speculate and overthink and over-speculate, create different sorts of problems. But walking became a thing. And so I'm trying to do that now. And I'm even learning to do it in the cold, which I've never done before. I hate the cold. I hate the friggin' winter. But I've been braving the cold. And so I go out a few nights ago because I'm in a weakened state, kids, right? I'm feeling things more intensely than I have been. I'm getting knocked back by things more than I have been. It's like, let's get out walking, all right? Let's get out processing. And we had a little bit of a thaw for a day or two, and then just a flash freeze. Just winter being an a-hole, you know? One of those. And so I go out walking, and the sidewalks are just ice. Just sheer ice, and not flat ice. Jaggedy ass ice. Undulating, uncertain ice, you know? It was all uneven. It was a metaphor. It was a physical representation of life at the moment. Just uneven, unreliable, unsure footing. And so I go out trying to walk off some of these emotions, trying to process, and I'm literally tiptoeing on the sidewalk. And I slipped a bunch of times, and it's cold, and it's been cold, and it's been snowy, and now I'm out here, and this winter is just pressing me. It's been gray. I'm affected by stuff. I am an empath, all right? This stuff gets to me, and I've done a good job. All right, I've done a good job with keep your wits about you, but it's just this combination of things. Marriage breaking up, dad dies, winter is oppressive, all of these things. And then just underneath all of that, this very unsteady foundation of what is the future? What is the future? You know, where am I going? I don't mean to make all of these episodes so much about me lately, but it's just what's coming through. All right. And I'm just going to have to process in the way that I process. So if you're sick of hearing me talk about myself, I apologize. But maybe this is relevant to you. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you've been in emotionally charged situations. Maybe you've been beaten down a little bit by this weather or by whatever's happening in your life. And then you factor in the world at large with the president of the United States doing psychopathic things. And normally, under normal circumstances, and these are so not normal circumstances politically, you could take a look at a gong show happening in America. And yeah, we are the mouse sleeping on top of the elephant, or the neighbors sleeping above the crack house, if you like. Normally, we could look at that from a relatively safe distance and say, well, it's a gong show down there again, but it's okay because it's usually self-contained. And it's not that now. I mean, what Trump is doing, not to make this political, but starting trade wars with Mexico, starting trade wars with us, threatening to absorb Canada, threatening to attack Panama, threatening a NATO ally in Denmark over Greenland, and doing everything without any single consequence with complete impunity. And then you realize this guy's nuts and arrogant, and he'll do anything that he wants to because there's never a consequence for friggin' anything. And so you think, theoretically, America's going to be America, but we're an ally, we're fine, don't worry about it. But it's not that now. Increasingly, it feels as though we are not an ally, but an adversary. And how far will he go, right? And is he going to actually attempt a takeover of Canada or an armed incursion into Greenland? He's capable of these things because nobody ever stops him doing anything. And it does no good at all, by the way, to speculate on that. But this is all floating around. And I've been listening to way too much independent pundit media talking about this, absorbing too much anger, absorbing too much fear. And I need to, again, set up a little bit of a wall, a glass sort of case against that, like they did at my church. The plexiglass in front of the drum kit, because that kid with the double kick pedal is too loud. You kind of need to set up that buffer against the media you consume. And I've not done a great job of that lately, and I'm in a weakened state. And so that contributes to the weakened state. But the state of the world is alarming. And what Trump is getting away with and what he's threatening to do and what he's already put in process to do and whatever the hell Elon Musk is doing. And if you voted for Donald Trump, I gotta just shake my friggin' head at you. Like I don't know what on earth you were thinking. Convicted felon, adjudicated rapist. He's nuts. Like I don't get it. I don't get how you can possibly ever justify that decision. But I don't want to make this political. I don't want to get anybody rankled up, but it's another factor. It's another factor in the wearing down of your collective or your individual fortitude. I have felt my fortitude wearing down. The combination of all this emotional stuff that's going on that I've been processing and to a certain extent holding at bay. Dad, my marriage, this uncertainty about my personal future, what I want that to look like, where I'm going to live, how I'm going to live, what I'm going to do for money. All of this stuff weighs in on you. The winter is oppressive. It's just not conducive. It doesn't uplift. The winter is too dark. It's too cold. It's too friggin' snowy. And it's all oppressive to somebody like me. Then you factor in global politics, this anarchic rise of the right and where it will ever stop. And it's very easy to get sucked down a rabbit hole of negative emotion. It's very easy to get sucked into an anxiety. It's very easy to get caught up in the emotion of it all. And you have your best laid plans and you work with your best intentions, but there are just moments where it catches you. And in the past week, it's caught me. I felt very unsteady indeed. I felt my footing not solid. And Arsenal beat Man City 5-1. Arsenal beat Man City 5-1. A complete dismantling, a complete pasting of Man City. Finally, years we've been waiting to stick it to those guys. And we did. And it was beautiful. And we got Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly, 17, 18 years old, both scoring worldies in that game. Beautiful. And I only barely enjoyed that. Like I'm at such a low ebb in some ways. Emotionally, just drained, just in a weakened state. And it's like, what do you do with that? All of this is not just me unloading on you fine people. I'm hoping you're not experiencing any of this. But if you are, I hope at least you're finding with me some reassurance and common ground, because it is possible to get through all of this. I was going to do a whole thing this week on the philosophy of Stoicism, but I'm already running out of time for that. But I've adopted a couple of Stoic principles throughout this time. The Stoicism is based on 4 cardinal virtues, let's say. The whole concept of the philosophy is about finding happiness. And we think of Stoicism as being that kind of stiff upper lip, keep calm and chive on sort of thing. And it is in part. But fundamentally, the goal of Stoicism as a philosophy, as a way of living, is to achieve happiness. All right. And it's got some principles for how a person does that, especially in circumstances like the ones I and perhaps you find yourself in right now. 4 cardinal virtues that are the foundation of Stoicism: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Those are heavy. Those are the good ones. And the idea is that if you adhere to these 4 principles in your life, in your acting, in your thinking, then they are the path to a genuine happiness, even in difficult circumstances. And I have adopted the temperance. Temperance is not necessarily about alcohol in this case. Temperance is about self-control, right? The temperance movement was about not drinking alcohol. That is about controlling your desires, controlling your impulses. And so temperance bleeds in the Stoic world into everything in your life, particularly as it pertains to emotions. All right. It is tempering yourself. It is showing restraint and not letting your emotions, particularly the negative, dark emotions, take over. Now, look at the circumstances I've been in over the past 6 months. Very, very easy to become fearful, anxious, depressed, angry, sad, bitter. All of those things, all of those toxic negative emotions, which are natural. Stoicism is about nature. It's about adherence to nature. And what they mean by that is your human nature. The Stoics had this idea that what separates humanity from animals is our natural ability to reason. And so reason becomes natural. And so this is an adherence to nature. Be rational. Use your reason. All right. Do not get caught up and swept away in your emotions or your desires, because we know that that leads to bad places. If you get caught up in anger, what's going to happen? Something bad, because you're going to act out on that anger or sadness or any sort of dark negative emotion. I mean, these exist for a reason. Sadness exists for a reason. Anger exists for a reason. What are they telling you? How do you process those things in a productive way? The Stoics are like, don't get caught up in that stuff. Don't get caught up in your emotions. Have temperance, have restraint, have self-control. And I have exercised that. Now, on my part, I'm also pulling in some Tao, also pulling in some Lao Tzu, which is, again, having faith in the way things are and surrendering into these moments, surrendering into these circumstances. The Stoics were on about let go of what you can't control. All right? If there are things that you can't control in life, let them go. All you can control is your reaction to the circumstances of your life. All right? I can't control Trump. I can only control my reaction to Trump or the weather, right? Or my dad dying. I can only control my reaction to that. That is a very Stoic thing. And of course, the courage, fortitude, and courage. I mean, Stoicism was founded by a cat called Zeno of Citium. Zeno, baby. Around the year 300 BC, Zeno had been a rich merchant, very successful man. Then there was a shipwreck, and Zeno lost everything. Busted back down to corporal, all right? Zeno lost everything. And so he's kicking around the bookshops of Athens, because even in 300 BC, Athens had bookshops. And he stumbles on a biography of the philosopher Socrates, better known to you and me as Socrates. He becomes fascinated by this story of Socrates and this thinker. And he says to the bookseller, where can a fella meet one of these philosophers? And this is Athens, 300 BC. Philosophers are everywhere. You can't swing a stick without hitting a philosopher. It's like those kids today with the broccoli head haircut. Everywhere you look. And as luck would have it, one was walking by at that moment. The bookseller says, well, hey, there's one. And that happened to be Crates of Thebes. And Crates of Thebes was a heavyweight in the cynicism philosophy, which is different from how we understand cynicism now. The cynic philosophy was, again, about this idea of nature and working from your human nature, which is rational and reasoning, and not conforming to the kind of civic expected standards, cultural standards, but going your own way, doing what is in you to do, doing what feels right to you. This is what the root of cynical philosophy was. And so Zeno starts following Crates around, learning about cynicism, and then from that develops Stoicism. But it all comes out of this idea of having lost everything. As I've said before, sometimes life requires of you nerves of steel. Now, that is a Stoic thing. That is where the stiff upper lip comes in. It's like you accept these circumstances and you react to them in the most positive way you can. There's a great quote from Epictetus, he's one of the, along with Marcus Aurelius, kind of the biggest voice in Stoicism. He says, "Be sick and yet happy, in peril and yet happy, dying and yet happy, in exile and happy, in disgrace and happy." I mean, that is the courage part. That is the fortitude part, where you face these circumstances and yet determine to be happy. And that is easier said than done. Some of you who are less emotionally inclined maybe can handle that. I can't. It's tough for me. Getting better at it, showing some kind of stoic fortitude in the face of circumstances. Sometimes life requires of you nerves of steel. Stoics knew that, and so they said, have courage, have fortitude in these circumstances. And I have tried to do so. And to surrender, with a little help from Lao Tzu, into these circumstances and allow and maintain the faith that you will find your way to the other side, and the other side will be better. The other side will be good. But there are going to be moments along that journey, Pilgrim's Progress, where it gets you, right? Where it beats you down just a little bit. I have felt that over the past week, and so what have I done about that? What have I done about being in a weakened state? It's interesting because one of the first things I did this on the weekend, is I just cleaned up the house. And I cleaned up basically the whole house, stuff that had been kind of left unattended for a while. I was away a lot of last week doing funeral stuff and estate stuff and dealing with Dad's apartment. Come home, it's like, okay, we need to vacuum. We need to tidy up. We need to restore order, right? I said, I felt like life is very uneven. I felt like my footing is unsure. And it's no surprise then that my natural inclination was to restore order. And so I cleaned up the place. And I've talked before about how a clean space feels lighter. Stuff has weight to it, existential weight. And so I cleaned up, vacuumed, tidied up, threw out a bunch of stuff, restored order, restored a kind of physical equilibrium in my environment. And I didn't play a gig at all in January, which is bloody rare, but I've got a couple gigs with Lindsay and the Lonelies coming up. We have a new record that's almost finished. It's coming out later this year. I'm really happy with it, proud of it, excited about it. So we got a couple of gigs this week, going on the road, playing a hometowner. And so it's been, okay, let's dedicate myself to prepping for those shows. I've struggled lately to practice drums for the sake of practicing. It helps if you've got a gig that you can prep for. And so I'm just running the set list, just go down and run the set list, feel good about it, work on my vocals, remember the arrangements, get them ready, dedicating yourself to something that feels good, something that pulls happiness out of you, right? Something that feels productive and practical. Cleaned up, working for the gigs. I was out last weekend with some friends, and that's important. I played some pickleball. It's good to be active. It's good to be social. Stoics had this idea too. We are not islands. We are social animals. And one of the ways in which we function best is in a social group, right? Doesn't mean you have to be with people all the time, but it's like you need to be around people, especially friends of yours. The Stoics were unique around Athens back in the day because they used to meet publicly. They used to meet in the Stoa Poikile. My Greek is nicht so gut. It was like this outdoor kind of meeting area on the back of the Agora in Athens, this colonnade, these pillars, right? The Stoa Poikile. That's how they got the name Stoics, because they were always hanging around the Stoa talking this stuff out, and that was rare. A lot of your heavyweight philosophers back in the day, you had to like sign up for the online workshop. You had to go to a seminar if you wanted access to these people. The Stoics were like, no, I want to talk to everybody. Let's gather them all around out here in the public market and talk it all out. What a time to be alive. Even the Stoics knew you need to spend time with people, and that's a good exchange of energy. And it's just good to be distracted from what's ailing you. And it's just edifying, and it beefs you up. Even if the circumstances of those meetings are somewhat awkward, which for me on the weekend, they were. I'm not going to say more about that, but I had a compelling and a relatively awkward event on Saturday night. But I'm still glad I went, and we'll see. Well, I'll just leave it at that. In any case, good to be with people, and so I made a point of doing that. And now I'm doing this podcast, which is a productive thing, which is another thing that I enjoy, which brings kind of fuel to the system, and expressing some of this stuff is important. And I don't want to do that in a self-indulgent way. I want to do it in a way where hopefully you find some resonance and some common ground. Maybe you're in this situation too, where life's got you just a little bit beat down. Maybe you are emotionally drained. Maybe you are physically drained. Maybe the state of things is getting to you. And so here's some ideas, right? If your space is unordered, order it. If you're feeling as though you're unsteady and the ground is not steady, make your living environment as steady and as clean and as open and as uplifting as you can make it. And then apply yourself to something. Okay, I've applied myself to prepping for the Lindsay gigs. I've applied myself to work. I've applied myself to this podcast. And it's important to feel as though you're doing something productive. It's important to feel as though you have control of something. Okay, I can't control what the American president is doing, but I can control my preparation for these Lindsay gigs. And these matter to me more than Donald Trump ever will. And so it's good to focus your energy and focus your attention towards things that feel productive and positive, right? And socializing and being with people. I've talked more than once on this podcast about how a social event has lifted me out of an anxious episode or lifted me out of a depression. And it's partly the distraction, it breaks the fever sometimes. You get wrapped up in your own thoughts so much, especially when you're alone. You can just begin to ruminate. You get trapped in your own thoughts. Get out with people. Be distracted. Have uplifting conversations. Let that energy move through you and just be distracted from the things that bother you. And trying to be rational. Rational in the sense of Stoics. And reacting to circumstances with rationality. Okay? It's hard not to take things personally sometimes. It's hard not to be self-conscious sometimes. You're out in public with a new group of people, for example, in a strange circumstance. And it's weird not to feel self-conscious. And it's weird to kind of relax and surrender into that too. I know it's difficult. I know all of this is difficult. But you've got two ways in which you can handle it. If circumstances are rough, you have the opportunity or the option of handling it from a negative perspective or handling it from a positive, productive perspective. Stoics are firmly in the positive, productive approach. All right, in peril, but still happy. It's the Tao of Mike Damone again. Whatever happens, your toes are still tapping. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about when I constantly reference the Tao of Mike Damone, that is a reference to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the seminal 1980s teen comedy about high school kids in California. Mike Damone is one of the kids in the high school, and he's a player and a shyster. He scalps tickets. He's a bookie. He's one of those guys. And this was his philosophy about women. All right? You don't care if she comes, lay, stays, or prays. Whatever happens, your toes are still tapping. And that is Epictetus too. If you're dying, your toes are still tapping. If you're in peril, hey, your toes are still tapping. Sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, but it's good to remember some of those things, you know? Hold on to some of those things. Keep your wits about you. Whatever happens, your toes are still tapping. That is not denial. That is a productive reaction to a circumstance. And I've been noodling all that around in my weakened state. And it's helped me get through. And so if that's you right now, whether that's seasonal affective disorder or you're dealing with some heavy stuff like I am, good to just pause, use your reason to react to some of these things, right? And then take productive action towards mitigating some of the darker toxic emotions. Clean your space. Do stuff that feels useful and productive and positive to you. Hang out with positive people, right? This is all the pursuit of happiness, which is what the Stoics were about, which is what human beings are all about fundamentally. Everything we do is in some way linked to being happy. It's all about a feeling we want. And that gets twisted sometimes, but that's the fundamental reality. And so I've been dealing with that. This has gone way too long already, so I'm going to cut it off. And I'm just giving you an encouragement. Okay, I'm feeling it. I've been feeling a bit down. Down is the wrong word. Just not even repressed. I'm just feeling in a weakened state. And maybe you are too. And so here are some just practical ways to approach that from a thinking level, to approach that from an activity level. Keep your wits about you, okay? I know it's difficult sometimes. I know sometimes things become so emotional that you just want to lose it. And I fully understand that, but do try to keep your wits about you. Remember those cardinal virtues of Stoicism: wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. Justice meaning being just fair. You know, just doing what is right, not justice for other people, but justice in your own actions. Being kind, being compassionate, even when, you know, people sin against you. Being compassionate about that, not easy to do. I mean, the Stoics were aiming high, and their moral philosophy became one of the foundations of Christian philosophy, by the way, down the line. Stoics predate Christianity by hundreds and hundreds of years, but those moral underpinnings became a lot of what you read and hear about in Christianity as well. So if that's your inclination, Stoics were one of the branches of that tree, all right? And just try to hang in there. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes you just endure. Sometimes life demands of you nerves of steel, and you gotta know that things will get better. All right, things will eventually get better. Sometimes you just got to hang in there and then take these steps that I've outlined just to give you a boost, just to help you along, man. Things are going to be okay. And to the extent that you can, try to surrender into those circumstances. I got to come back to that because I'm getting anxious about what happens in a year. What happens when my contract ends? Where do I go? What do I do? What's going to happen? And that's anxiety starting. And that is trying to control. And that is trying to impose your will and have your grip on things. The Stoics want you to use your will too, but they want you to use your will to not be emotional, right? Use your will to check those emotions. Use your reasoning and ration to check those emotions. I find myself getting caught up in how things are going to go, and that is not surrender. I'm much happier when I'm surrendered, and so I've got to rein myself in, pull myself back to that. Be conscious. Be optimistic, let go of the need to control, and trust that things are going to work out better than I could possibly have imagined for me and for you. Hold on to that, kids. All right, I got to go back to work. This is taking way too long. I do not intend to do 45-minute episodes anymore. I apologize for that. I thank you for hanging in. Do look after yourself. Remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. And hey, kids, come see Lindsay and the Lonelies this week, and I'll check you later. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying anything. You think I forgot, 'cause I'm not saying anything. But I'm thinking a lot. What a great lyric.